Bob, how can they accuse me of sexual harassment? I was just kidding around. And besides, we've been doing that sort of thing here for years. What's the big deal?
Kimberly, as my lawyer, how can you tell me that our company is being sued for sexual harassment when we didn't even know what was going on?
Because it's the law, Mike. It's the law.
That's right. It is the law. Sexual harassment cannot be allowed in any organization. It's that simple. Furthermore, it's not good enough to merely comply with the spirit of the law. Companies should follow the letter of the law. They should establish a very specific written policy, one that clearly prohibits sexual harassment in any form. And that policy should be read and signed off on by every employee. No exceptions. And those employees need to know their rights, what they can do if they're victims of sexual harassment. Preventing sexual harassment is not only the right thing to do, it's the wise thing to do. And we'll show you how to do it. We'll give you a step-by-step program for preventing and dealing with sexual harassment, a program that will not only help companies, but also guide employees, a program that will define your organization and set a course for its future. Hi, I'm Lorraine Brown. Let's begin with the definition of sexual harassment. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission defines it as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical contact of a sexual nature. The definition goes on to say that any of the following three criteria must be met to make it sexual harassment. First, if submission to this sexual conduct is either explicitly or implicitly made a condition of someone's employment, meaning your job may depend on going along with this kind of conduct. Second, if submission to or rejection of this sexual conduct is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting the individual. For example, it's sexual harassment if someone is not promoted because they would not go along with harassing sexual conduct. Now, these first two conditions are known as quid pro quo harassment. It simply means someone's job is affected if they don't comply with the supervisor's sexual requests or advances. The third criteria for sexual harassment is this. It's conduct that has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. In other words, it makes it difficult for someone to do their job. This is known as hostile environment sexual harassment, and this type of conduct can take many forms. For example, Mary Smith works as a customer service representative for a mid-sized company. She's experienced all kinds of sexual harassment.
Mary, how you doing, honey? Listen, when you get a chance, do you think you could come up to my office so we can discuss that report?
Now, some may say, what's the big deal? Why is this sexual harassment? First of all, it's inappropriate to call an employee or coworker names like honey, sweetheart, or dear. Sure, you may feel these words are harmless and have no sexual intent, but that's not the issue. The issue is that the other person may perceive this as an unwelcome sexual advance. They may feel it creates a hostile working environment. Thus, it can be considered sexual harassment. Now, the other problem in Mary's encounter was that her supervisor put his hand on her shoulder. Any suggestive physical contact like this can also be considered sexual harassment, be it touching someone's arm, grabbing their hand, rubbing their back, or brushing unnecessarily against their body. These kinds of contacts just cannot be allowed, and employees can take action if these types of advances occur. It may also be considered sexual harassment if someone tells jokes with sexual content, makes suggestive or obscene gestures, hangs up pornographic or sexually explicit photos, or makes sexually suggestive compliments.
Nice legs, Mare. Nice legs.
Bob, am I supposed to be turned on by that? Am I supposed to like that? What is your problem?
No problem, Mayor. I just think you got great legs.
Well, I think you ought to shut up about it. I don't need that, and I definitely don't want it.
This again could be sexual harassment. It's unwelcome and inappropriate. It creates a possible hostile environment for Mary to work in and function effectively. And by the way, don't think that sexual harassment like this only involves men victimizing women. It can also be women harassing men, or same-sex sexual harassment, men harassing men, or women harassing women. Sexual harassment can be involved in all of these scenarios. Now, another aspect of sexual harassment. What if two people are sitting in an open area and are talking about something of a sexual nature? And what if someone like Mary overhears it and finds it offensive? Yes, that again can be considered sexual harassment. If something like this affects a third party, even though they're not directly involved, it may still be harassment. And the same may apply if a whole group of people are talking about sexual matters and none of them has a problem with it. But if just one other person finds it offensive, it may be considered sexual harassment. So it's obvious that this type of harassment can occur in a lot of different situations. To avoid it, simply refrain from any comments or actions that can be possibly interpreted as sexually suggestive. This is the safest, most responsible, and clearly the most appropriate way of dealing with this very sensitive issue. So far, we've defined sexual harassment and looked at some real-life examples. Now we need to talk about preventing it and dealing with it when it happens. We'll begin with prevention. Every organization should develop a very specific policy on sexual harassment. This policy should be written, distributed to all employees, and posted in visible places throughout the organization. The policy should define sexual harassment, encourage people to file complaints, outline the company's grievance procedure, and detail possible penalties for violating the policy. And all employees, people like Mary, should read this policy and then sign it. By doing this, they are acknowledging that they understand the policy and are aware of it. It's also a good idea to have orientation meetings where you explain the policy.
Very simply, our sexual harassment policy is zero tolerance. We will not allow any type of sexual harassment in this organization. None at all.
This idea of zero tolerance is becoming more and more common. Many companies are saying we will not put up with any form of sexual harassment. They are putting their people on notice that they must be responsible and very sensitive to this issue. The good companies are also training their supervisors so they can deal with the harassment problems. This training should show how to spot sexual harassment, how to deal with it, how to investigate and document complaints, and how to prevent future problems by constantly monitoring employees and being aware of potential sexual harassment situations. Your company also should have a specific complaint procedure. This means encouraging employees to report any incidents of sexual harassment, emphasizing that there will be absolutely no reprisals against anyone who files a complaint, and ensuring that the complaint will remain confidential. Finally, the company should conduct a quick and thorough investigation of any complaint. This involves a supervisor interviewing the person who brought the complaint, and also talking to the individual accused of sexual harassment. In addition, he should talk to anyone else who might have observed the incident. During this whole process, the supervisor should document all the information he receives, so there's a complete and accurate record of the entire case. Then, no matter what the judgment, he should get back to the person who brought the complaint as soon as possible and explain his findings.
Mary, we reviewed your complaint and definitely feel that it is valid. So we went ahead and we reprimanded Bob and informed him that if this does happen again, he'll be suspended.
I appreciate it, Dan. I really do. Believe me, I haven't enjoyed bringing this complaint. I just felt I had to do it.
Well, we're really glad that you did. It's the only way to prevent incidents like this from happening again. I would like to thank you for stepping forward and acting. It's what we really need from everyone.
This supervisor did a good job of responding quickly to the complaint and then making Mary feel comfortable that she brought this action. It's vital that companies convey this type of attitude to the process. If they don't, they can face real problems. For example, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that a company can be held liable when supervisors sexually harass their employees, even if the company had no knowledge of the harassment and did not do anything to cause it. The company can still be liable, along with the supervisor. So what should the company do? The only thing it can do is to take every step possible to prevent sexual harassment. That means policies like zero tolerance, policies that specifically spell out every employee's responsibility in dealing with sexual harassment. It's a preventive, proactive approach, one that the courts expect, and one that will help both the employees and the organization. At this point, let's look at how individual employees should deal with sexual harassment. We'll begin with the victims. They should start by directly informing the harasser that the conduct is unwelcome and must stop.
Look, I don't appreciate your comments, and I don't like those little gestures you keep making. So please, stop it now. It's really bothering me.
When something like this happens, the victim should document the incident. She should write out what happened and specify that she asked the person to stop this activity. This could be important if the person persists in this type of sexual harassment. After documenting the situation, the victim has two choices. If she feels the problem is minor, she can wait and see if it stops in the future. If it does, nothing else is needed. But if she feels the behavior was flagrant, or if it continues despite her warning, she may want to file a formal complaint. This complaint should be filed as soon as possible after the incident. Normally, it should go to her immediate supervisor. But if the supervisor is doing the harassing, she should then take the complaint to the next person up the ladder. It's also possible that the company might have a person designated to take these complaints. If that's the case, the victim should go to this person immediately. Now, a different situation. What if a third party witnesses an employee sexually harassing another, or a friend tells this third party that she's been sexually harassed?
Steve, I need your advice. Bob's really been bothering me. You know, he looks at me kind of funny and makes all these disgusting comments. You know, sexual kind of stuff. I really think I should do something. I just don't know what. It's really bothering me. I need your help.
In this case, the coworker needs to take action. The best thing to do is encourage the other employee to complain to the appropriate person at the company. It's vital that the coworker not stand idly by and do nothing. He must take action to ensure that the appropriate persons at the company have an opportunity to take corrective action. Now, let's look at still another person involved in sexual harassment, the offender. What does that person need to do? Very simple. Stop the behavior immediately. Next, apologize to the victim.
Mary, look, I'm sorry. I don't have any excuses. I acted like a stupid kid, and I totally understand why you were upset. The only thing I can say is, it won't happen again. I mean that. It won't happen again.
And the offender shouldn't just limit his actions to an apology. He should also, under all circumstances, avoid any reprisals. Remember, he's the one at fault, not the victim. And if his behavior is part of a continuing pattern of sexual harassment, the person should be encouraged to get some sort of help or counseling. Finally, if a formal complaint has been filed against the offender, he should seek legal counsel or assistance to understand his rights. To summarize, everyone involved in a sexual harassment case needs to communicate, take action, and work for resolution. If this happens, their company will be well on its way to effectively dealing with sexual harassment. Let's look now at some other legal issues dealing with sexual harassment. For example, what if an employee accuses another employee of sexual harassment? And what if the company investigates the complaint, finds it was valid, and disciplines the so-called offender? No problem, right? You followed all the proper procedures and taken appropriate action. Case closed, correct? Well, not necessarily. What if this happens?
Miss Johnson, you haven't heard the last of this. Now let me tell you, there's no way I harassed that man. No way. Your so-called investigation was a joke. It was totally unfair. It made me the victim, not him, and it wasn't even the way it happened. Now let me tell you, I am not going to put up with that. So expect a call from my attorney right away.
This company is now facing a lawsuit, but not from a victim of sexual harassment. The suit is coming from the employee who allegedly committed the harassment. More and more, these people are taking their cases to court. Their claim? That they were unfairly disciplined or possibly fired for sexual harassment. And some of them are winning their cases. So what does that mean for their companies? It means they must work even harder to make sure they deal carefully and fairly with sexual harassment cases. They must investigate the charges thoroughly, interviewing everyone involved. And if they feel an employee is guilty of sexual harassment, they should then take one more step before turning to disciplinary action. They should talk to their lawyer. They should make sure he feels they've followed the right procedures and that the disciplinary action is legally defensible. By taking this step, they can avoid a lot of problems later. Now, some other legal questions a company can possibly face. The first involves this scenario.
Dawn, I've got bad news. I'm going to have to let you go. You're just not doing the job.
Oh, that's real good. Real good. And I suppose it was just a coincidence that just last week you were coming on to me with your little sexual game. And now, all of a sudden, you're going to fire me because I turned you down? Well, I don't think it was just a coincidence, and let me tell you something. I am going to fight it. There is no way you're going to get away with this. No way.
This is a classic case of the quid pro quo harassment we mentioned earlier. The manager makes a sexual advance to a subordinate. The subordinate objects to the advance and rejects it. Then the manager fires or demotes her for rejecting his advance. The question is the company liable for damages in cases like this, no matter what? As we said before, the answer could be yes. To say that you've tried to prevent this type of harassment or that you didn't even know that it was occurring may not work as a defense. You, as a company, would still be liable if it's a quid pro quo case of harassment. Now, a different situation. What if a supervisor makes sexual advances to an employee, but in this case, there were no threats if the employee didn't go along or no later reprisals? Is the company liable again? Well, it may be, if it hasn't taken the proper preventive actions. But the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that companies can be protected when they can prove that they've instituted an effective sexual harassment policy and that the victim of the harassment did not utilize this policy to deal with the problem. For example, the employee never filed a complaint, never mentioned the harassment to anyone, but then left the company and took legal action later. In this case, the company may not be necessarily held liable. Again, that's because the employee did not utilize the company's sexual harassment policy.